Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 29th, 2022 Cincinnati Public School Audit Committee meeting. Let's all stand up and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for attending. Superintendent Wright is not here, correct? Okay, so we're going to move on to the audit updates. Lauren, you're going to start by talking about the status of past recommendations that were made last year. Everybody should have a handout on this too in their packet, by the way.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all. Happy summer. I appreciate all of you joining tonight, especially as we head into the 4th of July holiday. So let's have a great meeting tonight, and we're going to keep things moving right along. I'll have two presentations this evening, and I'll roll right from one to the other. So we'll go ahead and pull up the fiscal 23 internal audit kickoff presentation, please. Wonderful. So through this presentation, I will be covering 3 documents within your folders. First, we'll cover the status of past recommendations. Second, our fiscal 2023 internal audit plan. And then finally, my goals for the year. In respect to time, I will cover things at a high level and leave time at the end for any questions or comments as well. So the first document you have in your packet is the status of past recommendations report, which summarizes all of the past internal audit recommendations that have been made over the years. The goal of this work is to keep focus on open recommendations, as well as provide a summary for our administration, audit committee, and the Board of Education, so we know where to better direct our resources to ensure things are being implemented. This slide in front of you contains a snippet of page 2, the table on page 2 of your report, and it highlights the projects that still have open recommendations. Those are indicated by the in progress column there you see. As you see, most of the fiscal 2022 projects, or all of them rather, have things that are still in progress, which of course is to be expected. However, we do have some somewhat lingering recommendations from the fiscal 2019 as well as fiscal 2020. So of those 3 that still have recommendations, you'll see that benefits as well as the transportation expenditures are actually being included into this year's fiscal 23 audit plan. So I'll defer that conversation until our next topic. But I will say the network security and assessment, we've met with our CIO and ITM leadership to talk through the progress of those implementation of those recommendations. So while they have implemented 8 thus far, they're still working through the remaining 7, and they anticipate those being completed within this fiscal year. So overall, we're very pleased. We have about 75% of the 133 recommendations we've issued since I joined the district completed, which I think is phenomenal progress and really speaks to our partnership with management as well, and that I feel that our recommendations have value, and I think the fact that they're being implemented supports that as well.
Hey, Lauren.
Yes.
You either slow down or there's some sort of, the audio isn't either working too well. Hard to understand what you're saying.
Maybe I'll step back. Can you hear me that way? We'll see how this goes. Just wave your hand if you can't hear me. So moving on to our next slide. So next we'll move on to our fiscal 2023 internal audit plan. The purpose of the internal audit plan is to outline the activities and objectives of the internal audit department for the year. We perform an extensive risk assessment each year to determine what projects are most critical and should be included in the plan. Our risk assessment is based upon our professional judgment and understanding of the district, as well as the input we gather from a wide variety of stakeholders, including district leadership, and most importantly, the Audit Committee and Board of Education. The risk assessment methodology is outlined on the slide shown. As we have always done, we begin with the district's 132 budget units. As a reminder, the budget units are our departments as well as our schools. We then analyze the 132 budget units by financial risk. This essentially means what are our most material budget units. From there, we select the top 10 budget units for further analysis in the remaining 3 risk categories, being audit risk, functional risk, and entity level risk. So one thing we did differently this year that I think the committee will be pleased to hear is we actually adjusted the level in which we perform the risk assessment. I know last year there were questions of how do we connect the results of the risk assessment to the projects that are ultimately selected in the plan. And so now with a larger team and a more wide variety of skill set on our team, we were able to break down the top 10 budget units, so departments, schools, into each sub-process that those departments oversee, and then performed our risk assessment at each sub-process level. So what the result of this work is, our risk assessment now shows the specific projects that we should include in this year's plan. So it's a nice continuous perspective between the risk assessment and ultimately the plan you see in front of you.
Hey, Lauren, I had a question on,
Yes.
on the first slide. I got away from me a little fast. You have a column called no evidence reported. So what's the definition of no evidence?
Yes, so no evidence reported means that no progress has been made to date. So when we ask management, have you made progress in this recommendation? If the answer is no, or we don't receive a response, that goes under no evidence reported. So luckily we have progress in all of our areas, but historically there have been times when we haven't either made progress or received a response.
So if it's a 0, that's a good thing?
You got it, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. So as I was mentioning, with the risk assessment methodology being improved this year, we have a direct connection between the results of the assessment and the projects we're selecting. So what does this really mean? It means that we as auditors are utilizing our professional judgment and the feedback I mentioned to say what are the most critical areas of the district and how can internal audit support them this year. So you can see a direct connection between the top 5 budget units as well as the process areas that are contained within them. So those process areas ranked the highest of each of those budget unit areas. And ultimately you see the internal audit projects that correlate here as shown by the highlight. The final column you'll notice is, the last column is shown the prioritization based on the cumulative feedback we received from the Audit Committee and Board of Education members. So huge thank you and kudos to this group. We received feedback from all 13 Audit Committee members as well as 2 additional board members, which certainly was a big accomplishment and something we were very serious about, I know, as internal audit and this committee, in ensuring that we are properly prioritizing based on your perspectives. You'll see there, that's the prioritization that we utilize now as we put together the plan and as we look at our prioritization of projects and hours throughout the year. So on this slide, you'll see a summary of all of the projects that are contained in the plan. Pages 6 through 8 of the plan provide descriptions of each of those categories: advisory, assurance, and follow-up. So I won't spend time going through them now. However, you can see also the descriptions of each of the projects contained in the plan that can give you some more insight as to what we are set to accomplish with each area. I will, however, call out the 2 areas that were the highest priority to the Audit Committee. First being the transportation expenditures. So the Transportation Expenditures Advisory Project was the first priority of the committee. As there has been a change in leadership since the issuance of the original report, the incoming Director of Transportation and Chief Operating Officer will need to be brought up to speed on the original findings and recommendations from the report. So therefore, we will partner with new leadership to bring them up to speed and the key takeaways, so that way we can continue to build upon those and ensure they're implemented. The second piece is the payroll audit. That is the second highest priority from the feedback we received. And we determined through extensive conversation with payroll leadership that the key area for our focus should be supplemental pay. The reason we selected this in coordination with management is supplemental pay has a wide variety of types, and with a wide variety and unique treatment comes inherent risk. So our goal is to help understand where the controls should be and hopefully streamline those processes. As we talked about in our follow-up payroll audit we did this past year, we know payroll works, but it's all about those inputs. So this is us addressing the complexity of a wide variety of inputs to hopefully have a more consistent and accurate output.
Hey, Lauren, the superintendent just arrived, I think. I saw her. Okay. She's on a limited time. She has limited amount of time, so you can introduce her, Jennifer, is that correct?
Yes, Chairman Bolton asked me to do the introduction, so I'd like to present to you my new partner, Ironetta Wright, and I call her Coach, and there's a story behind that. But so we've worked together she officially started on May 2nd, but we began meeting like 2 days after she was appointed to work on the budget and get the budget done, and approved last night or Monday night, yay. Anyway, so I will let her go from there.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Lauren. Sorry to interrupt you at this time, but I do have a meeting after this one, so I did just want to come in as I was asked to come in and share. As Jen shared, as Treasurer Wagner shared, I started on May the 2nd, for those that aren't aware of that, and have hit the ground running since May the 2nd. I was named on February the 28th, and she's also correct. I think our first meeting was on March the 2nd. Didn't even have a contract then, but we had actually started work. I'm excited to be boots on the ground in the work that we're doing, and have really gotten really involved in the intricacies of our work and where we need to go next. Up until this time, in terms of what would be specific to the audit committee, I have had the opportunity to meet with Lauren to review each of the audits that we've had up until this time and to begin to talk about next steps. I think Lauren and Treasurer Wagner, as well as the board members, will share. I'm pretty intense when it comes to making sure that we are looking at our system and processes and recognizing that it's important for us to move sooner than later in terms of what that looks like. So we do have new staff members that are coming aboard. In terms of our organizational structure, there is a change across the board in terms of organization. And two of those additions are in the Director of Facilities and the Director of Transportation. And we know that both of those have been areas that have been concerns in terms of focus when we think about the auditing perspectives and what we need to look at. So we make sure that our return on investment is what it needs to be, but that we're also being lean in our processes, that we're using quality improvement methods to ensure that we are maximizing the funding that we have, as well as maximizing our processes to make sure our children get what they need. The other area I think that we think about organizationally that has been an area of the need for focus definitely is in our benefits area for human resources. I know that's been a long time project that we're working through, and we're going to get there in terms of making sure that we have been thoughtful about how we do the work. It didn't start overnight, and so I would be remiss to say that I believe that it will end overnight, but knowing is half the battle, and two, having an expectation for follow-up is the other half, because I think the team has been doing what they could to get follow-up from those that need to do the follow-up, but it has not at this point met the level of my expectation for what that looks like. And so I do believe that as we move forward, you should expect to see movement in the areas that we've not seen movement in. Just today, we've received a draft of our draft agreement for our contract for transportation with SORTA, which is a plus for us. We have been working that from both ends. Our attorneys have been involved in that process, as our board knows. As of Monday night, we did not have an update, and literally this may have been probably, I think I saw it right before I walked out of the office. So we're excited about that. One of the areas that we're focusing on across the board also is in our contracting. As we think about contracts, really making sure that we're focusing on our return on investment. What are the deliverables that we're looking for in the contracts, and how are we holding those accountable that are a part of that, that are giving us the services that we're looking for, but how are we making sure that we're monitoring in those areas? So I think that those were the major areas that I was asked to speak about, but I do have a few more minutes if there are individual questions for me or Chairwoman Bolton, if there are individual questions as well.
I'd just like to tell you that if you discover something or find something that requires attention or looking into further, make sure you let us know about it, because our resources, Lauren and her team, are available.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll certainly defer to the chair, Mr. Heldman, but I do think it'd be great for, I know we've shared your biography, I think 2 meetings ago. We shared any number of times the search itself and its progress. And then I think last meeting we shared in the writing your 100-day plan so that the audit committee was able to see that. And it was, as you know, everybody is a 7-0 vote. And we have done something that Cincinnati Public hasn't done for quite some time. We chose somebody that was not internal. And I think that's a big message. And I think there's some interest from the audit committee that indeed that happened for all things to consider. So we're pleased. And if the superintendent won't mind, maybe we can go around the table so that she can meet you before she has to go. That works for her.
Does, absolutely.
My name is Tim Heldman. I'm the audit committee chairman. I'm a CPA. I'm a partner in a local accounting firm. Been on the audit committee for 5 years, Jim, would you say? And welcome aboard. And hopefully we'll be able to make a contribution to the district.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Holdhouse. I'm the vice chair of the audit committee. I'm also a CPA. I'm also a partner in a local accounting firm. And I've also been on the audit committee as long as Tim. I think we joined in the same term. So looking forward to partnering.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Clarice Warner. I've been on the audit committee, I think 2 terms now, and I am a certified healthcare compliance officer. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I'm Liz Guttridge. I am a CPA. I'm a CPS parent and graduate, and I've been on the audit committee, I think 2 years. So.
Hi, Paul Kitzmiller. I think I'm the newest member to the audit committee. This is just my 3rd meeting. I have 2 boys in CPS, soon to be a 3rd in about a year, and welcome.
My name is Jim Crossett, and I'm pretty sure I'm the most senior member of the audit committee, serving many years. So I've seen the audit committee, our audit committee, go from sort of a kitchen table committee to what we have today, which we think is the best audit committee in Ohio. And that's been really fun. And I am also a CPS alumni, very proud CPS alumni.
Hello, and my name is Carol Mitchell Lawrence. I think I'm on my 2nd term as well on the audit committee. I am a proud CPS graduate of Withrow High School. I also am the vice president of our alumni association. For my career, I worked for Macy's. I've been there 33 years, and I sit in the director of HR technology with specific emphasis on payroll, which is one of the reasons why we are deep into making sure that we have all of our checks and balances as well here. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to each of you, and more importantly, thank you for your service, for what you're doing for our children as being a part of our audit committee. The only ask that I would have as I exit to go to my next meeting is this is information that you've been looking at for a period of time. I've been boots on the ground in Cincinnati Public Schools since May the 2nd. As of today, I visited all of our 65 schools, 66 with our programs with the exception of 2, and those will be visited tomorrow. So I've really had an intentional focus around getting into the buildings. Even though school was out on May 28th, I continued to visit during Summer Scholars, and I shared with Summer Scholars was ended on Tuesday, but I also shared with staff that by the 30th, I will get to all of these buildings. So if principals are already gone, that's okay. Let your building engineer know or your custodian know that I'll be there, because I do want to make sure that I walk all of the campuses. You have been seeing the information for a period of time. I am just getting involved in the information. So the only question that I would ask is just give me the time to really be responsive to the system structures and processes that we need to put in place. Because again, it did happen overnight, and it would be, I would not want to overpromise and underdeliver that it will be fixed overnight. What I will say is it will get done. It definitely will get done. Because it is important. And I do think that we have pure partnership in the work that we're doing. Jennifer, I called her Jennifer today. Jen and I have worked together closely. Lauren and I are beginning to do the same work. And so I do see that that team will be able to continue to move the work forward. So if there is not anything else for me, is there anything else for me? Awesome. Thank you so very much. And thank you to our chair for that time.
Thank you. You're welcome to attend any meeting, any and all meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, Lauren, continue. You had to stop at payroll and then going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you again for attending, Superintendent Wright. We'll pick back up on the next slide, please. We'll move over to the 2022-23 goals for the year. So I have been listening. To your feedback. One of the things I heard at our last meeting was we liked the brevity of those last reports. So we take that seriously and actually embedded that into this year's goals rather. You'll see the final goal there around reporting is the one I'll spend a few minutes highlighting. Our goal this year is to re-engineer our internal audit reports. So we have numerous audience for the reports. The most important is our public reporting we do here for the Board of Education and Audit Committee. Our second, of course, is to our management and making sure we have those details. So what we will design this year is a twofold report. The first predominant section will be focused on you all as our audience, and then we will have an attachment which contains the details that management needs in order to address the findings and recommendations. So we'll try to keep things high level. That was the feedback we heard through our surveys, and try to keep things big picture while still providing the level of detail necessary so management understands the root cause and can address the details to correct the findings that we come across. So that concludes the 3 areas that I wanted to cover today. I'll move over to any comments and questions, and I will make a quick note that we must do a formal motion, second, and roll call for the fiscal 23 plan as well as my goals. But first, let's open the floor to questions or comments.
Anybody have any questions for Lauren?
So the vote will be...
What exactly are we voting on, Lauren?
Yep, so the vote will be for fiscal 23 internal audit plan as well as my goals for the year. We can do them separately, or if we're all in agreement, we can do them all together, I believe.
So the plan starts with fiscal year 2023 planned engagements, advisory, cash controls and minimization, transportation expenditures, et cetera?
Correct. That whole document there, as well as the attached memo with my goals.
So is this the order you're going to do these things in, or is it alphabetical, or what's...
Great question. So the back of the plan document, you'll see a high-level calendar. That includes our projection as well as the audit committee meeting in which we hope to report. Of course, that is projected. I stress that because, as we all know as auditors, once you get into things, it could change, but that is the goal.
Okay, so here's your calendar. Okay, so you have the benefits audit not starting until August, right? And you're going to be starting on security badge and cash controls and minimization. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a reason why we're waiting a month for the benefits follow-up?
Predominantly because we think the security needs to get started at the start of the school year, and then benefits is scheduled thereafter. Since we can, only do a couple of projects at once, we're trying to layer them in with a staggered start.
Okay, you have two auditors. Is one going to do security and one cash controls, or are they both going to work on them simultaneously? Or?
So all three of us will work on all of these projects simultaneously, each playing different roles in each project.
Okay, the security badges, when you badge in, a report is generated and you're making sure people that are no longer employees are gaining access to the buildings.
Correct.
One of the primary things. Okay, so I move to approve the internal audit plan and calendar for fiscal 2023. I'll make that motion.
And
I'll
maybe
second.
include the goals in that motion as well.
Okay, and the goals as well.
Thank you.
I'll second.
And Treasurer Wagner, could you please call
Is there
roll
any
for us?
discussion? Any discussion from?
Yes, I got a question. On the transportation audit, the timing of that starts in September. That looks like it's going to start after school has begun. And the superintendent mentioned that we have a new director of transportation. Is the timing of that still September? Does that make sense given a new director and it's after the school year? Wouldn't we want to look at some things before the school year starts? Make sure kids will get all picked up on time? Or?
Yes, perfect question. So I looked at the superintendent's recommendations yesterday and see that our new director of transportation starts July 1st. So we'll give them just 1 minute, but then we will be there as soon as possible to start working with them. So when the plan was drafted a couple weeks ago, it was contingent on their hiring. So we're very pleased to hear we can start sooner. So great comment, and we will get right to it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And the continuous auditing component, is that the work that you do with the external auditors?
It's actually separate. So what we've designed is a process, or what we will be designing and continue to build upon each year, is the repetitive nature of some of our analytics. So rather than waiting for us to launch a full-scale assurance audit, what we're learning is we can periodically reperform some of our testing analytics to provide more regular feedback. So the focus of this year will be on employee reimbursements, which was a test from this past year's AP audit, as well as P cards, because we've done that audit twice now. So perhaps every quarter or every other month, we'll run some quick tests to provide more timely feedback to our treasurer's office team.
Not sure this is added to what we're voting on, but I really liked your chart about the status of the audits. But I wondered if there's some way to incorporate something with that chart or that information that also gives some inkling of the impact of what those audits produce. Is that something, I don't know if we vote on that now or it's just a recommendation, but.
That's a great suggestion. It's something I often talk about with the Council of Great City Schools internal audit team. And it's something even Treasurer Wagner and I have discussed over time is how do you quantify some of our impact, whether it's the educational impact we have in the classroom or more specifically the internal audit recommendations. So I really will take that to heart and think as we move forward, especially how do we measure success? I know we're having that conversation a lot throughout the district. How do we measure success of our contracts? But also how do we measure success of these audit recommendations? I tend to take the stance of being a bit more conservative because I know the corresponding comment to this recommendation saves us X dollars, sometimes people deduce that to mean we're being wasteful as an organization. And I don't want that to be the takeaway, because we are certainly not. So we have to be tactful in how we quantify and really highlight success while still making the district, embrace the opportunities, if that makes sense.
Well, you can certainly extrapolate your testing over the population, right? So if you-
Exactly. So I think that's a
check
great
the benefits for
suggestion.
25 people and 5 are getting benefits they're not entitled to or something like that.
Yeah.
And you could multiply that times the number of employees we have
Yeah,
to measure the impact of that. And I think that would be valuable for us.
absolutely. So
Now,
that
not everything you do can be quantified in terms of dollars. I think that is one thing that could be.
absolutely. And so that was part of the development as an internal audit shop, in that in order to extrapolate our sampling, we have to make our sampling selection based on the standard deviation. So kind of going back to statistics. So we have to make sure our methodology is solid and that it is truly representative of the population. So that is part of our growth. And I think that's something I'm really glad you mentioned at the start of this plan that we keep in mind as we move forward. We'll take that to heart.
We'd like to add quantify results.
Absolutely.
Okay, and report back quantified results if possible.
Absolutely. So we'll embed that into our reporting for each of our engagements this year and quantify when possible.
Okay. Any other questions for Lauren from the audit committee? Lauren, Eve?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I know for years we've kind of struggled on trying to determine the risks for some of the various projects that you did, and I just appreciate the survey that you guys put together and sent out to us. I think that was great.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Warner. I appreciate that.
I would suggest or second or whatever the proposals and recommendations, and it should be part of be a revised, that I would incorporate it before we vote on it, that we are putting the revisions in, and that's what we'll be voting on too, those suggestions and recommendations.
Absolutely. So I reiterate what I think I heard is just be sure we're clear, is that we will quantify recommendations when they're being made or findings when they're found, or as we continue to update on the impact of past recommendations. The takeaway is we will quantify wherever possible.
And I think I understood too that we're interested in having the transportation effort start earlier, and you said you would based on the hire.
Yep.
But I also think it's important for you to be aware of the contract with Metro and to be able to follow the contracts that we have, the 5-year contracts with, I think it's 6 or 7 vendors regarding Yellow Bus as well. I just think that at this time, I think that should be sort of incorporated. And I know the treasurer will be watching that as well. I mean, the lawyers can write the contract, but we need to have some sort of major financial monitoring of our greatest failing over the last 5 or 6 years to make sure that it's not our 7th or 8th year of failure again. Not to belabor that, but it's crucial. The other thing is, I do believe that the superintendent and I believe the board are committed to a strategic plan. And I would ask the treasurer, one of the problems with the last strategic plan, which we feel was fairly successful, even in the midst of COVID, was that throughout that planning of the strategic plan and the targeting, we weren't watching any dollars during it. I mean, there was an interest by the finance house, the House of Finance, to do that, but maybe if we can understand the role that the financial folks can play in that development, because that's going to kick off in the next 60 days or so, as I understand it.
So I wouldn't say we weren't watching the dollars, okay, because we watch every dollar that we spend. But the comment I made was we develop a strategic plan without fully understanding the complete long-term cost of ownership.
That's much better stated than a levy year.
So budgeting from 1 year at a time with a long year plan out there, it makes it really difficult to plan for that and forecast for it and set money aside for it. So we're going to participate in a stronger fashion. I'm recruiting Ms. Roberts to help me.
And just wondering with the quantifying so far as transportation is concerned, since we had such a black eye on that, is there any way for us to track the success rate, the pickup drop-off success rate, and gauge it for last year? Because I know there was a lot of rumblings with parents and a lot of disgruntled parents with, our inability to get their kids picked up and dropped off as they were in the past. So I think it would be helpful if we can somehow quantify that, and that would be a success story, hopefully, that we can tell the public as we move forward.
You want me to respond? So there are measures for yellow bus contracts that do on-time performance, pickup and drop-off. Harder to do with the metros, but specifically because they merged the routes that were dedicated to students versus public routes. And so they have to determine if it's in fact the student that's jumping on that bus. And so there's some work to do in that arena. But I know they're working on it and defining that in the contract. So when they fail to meet those things, there's financial implications that we deduct off of their bills.
What percentage of our students that we transport ride Metro? Half?
I want to say 3,700 of the 26,000, but you don't quote me on that because I'm just going off from the top of my head.
Yeah.
7th and 8th grade are being put back on yellow bus, unless a parent chooses to do otherwise. But that's correct, right, Ms. Bolton? Yeah.
Yes, I would. It's probably half of our high school population on Metro, and it used to be a little bit more when we had regular routes, I think, for them. But again, this has just been a rough, bad year, instructionally, and I think risk-wise. And that open pass where we don't know where our students are, and we're only responsible for getting them to and from school, and we buy passes also for people that don't use them, and at great cost. So that's a kind of cost we can't continue to afford. That's a perk. So there's going to have to be some sort of proof. So I think the board will be very interested to watch these contract negotiations and hope and also help guide what we think the community wants in that Metro sorta. I have some confidence about the yellow bus opportunities based upon what's going on, but that's more of our children and our little people as well. So that's of concern. But this contract with Metro sorta, if we don't get this right, it won't be right ever again. Last year has to be an anomaly. Not that we're ever going to get the routes back, but there are other things that can be done to get our teenagers to and from school and at the right time, so that they're not having to get up at 4:30 in the morning to say, oh, well, I got them there by using the routes. Well, yeah, but that's not helpful. We don't want our staff to be responsible for 30 minutes, more than 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after, instead of this getting kids at someplace, oh, you didn't have a route problem. No, but you got me there 2 hours early. So this is huge. And I'm saying this publicly to the treasurer and the world. We really need to have eyes on the Metro contract before anything gets signed.
Yeah, I will just add one other part too, is that what we're measuring with Metro is more about the reliability of the bus being there on time, which is a little bit different than what we would do for yellow bus, which is measuring whether or not the students were transferred on their scheduled routes. And so in some ways, that's also what makes measuring Metro a little bit harder, is that if they get there again too early, that is a problem. If they run inconsistently afterwards, that's what we were more, or inconsistently before and afterwards, that's what we were really trying to measure, because that's what the parents are relying upon, is that this bus will hit these different points at certain times, which ends up being a lot different, because if a kid just doesn't get on a bus, that's not necessarily the fault of the bus driver if the bus was there. Whereas yellow bus service, we're actually expecting every kid to be on the bus and transferred. And so I do think those are things that, as we look at those measurements and we look at ways to evaluate the successfulness of those things, which might actually be a great mark for us to show in these next coming years, we can look at those things specific to how they relate to how the person's using that service.
Lauren, you got all that for your audit?
Yeah. Your middle initial is going to be T, as ours has been. All about transportation.
You got it.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to approve the plan with
Revised.
revisions, revised plan. Dan seconded. Do you want a vote from each individual audit committee member, Lauren?
Yes, please. And Treasurer Wagner is a pro at this, so I'll let her coordinate if you don't mind.
Okay, Treasurer Wagner, you have the floor.
Okay, so roll call vote. Mr. Heldman? Say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Holthouse?
Aye.
Mr. Crossett?
Aye.
Ms. Guttridge?
Aye.
Mr. Kitzmiller?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mrs. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you all very much, and a huge kudos to our team that spent countless hours updating our risk assessment and putting together a really robust plan for the year. So I'm really excited, and thank you all for your approval. Well, very good. So you're not done with me yet. Next topic we'll transition to will be a bit more interactive and hopefully a great value add for our new members of our audit committee. So we'll go ahead and transition. You have the slides in your folder as well. So we're transitioning over to an audit committee training. And then the second part of this conversation will be around our goals and work plan for the year. So you will also have access to the electronic version of this document, which is really where the value lies in terms of resources and links. So as we move through, everything that is underlined is a hyperlink and is meant to be a resource for everyone to refer back to and further explore as you choose on your time as it allows. So fantastic. We'll go ahead and jump right in. But like I said, this is meant for our new members, new audit committee members, our new board members who are joining our audit committee for the first time. Let's see. So we might have a little bit of a restart here. So if you have the files in front of you, the first slide is about CPS as a governmental entity. So we'll hop right onto that first slide there about CPS. So this slide summarizes the key oversight bodies that us as a governmental entity are a part of. So the links, like I mentioned, are going to be really useful as a new audit committee and a longstanding audit committee member. The first set of links is to our auditor of state. So as a reminder, our financial external auditors, Plattenberg, perform our annual audit as a third-party provider on behalf of the Ohio Auditor of State.
We can't forward the slide, is that the problem? Oh, there it is.
I think so. Yep, there we are. And so one thing I would highly, highly recommend is emailing press@ohioauditor.gov as a way to sign up for their newsletter. I follow this very closely through their press releases, and it helps us understand what the Ohio Auditor is looking for, what are common findings, what are common trends. And of course, we use all of that to inform our risk assessment, but I think as audit committee and board members, it's really insightful to see maybe where other governmental entities may not have stuck to the rules. So we can ensure we do not fall victim of something similar. On the next point there is the Ohio Attorney General's site.
Before you move on,
Yes.
what's the latest trend from the Ohio Auditor that just pops out in your mind that you've seen that gives you consternation?
So probably the two most common trends that we see from the Ohio Auditor of State is theft in office, which is frequently in a cash basis or in an organization which their fiscal officer is the only person looking at financials. So that's really common, and I think we're addressing that this year through our cash minimization project. And then the other piece are similar but different are the P card or the credit card transactions. some organizations don't have the same level of control as we have. So that's been a big priority of ours as well. Yeah, great question. And the next piece is a reminder. This is something frequently visited by our board members and we're all aware of, but just to drive the point home, Ohio Sunshine Laws. I'd highly recommend following the link if you're not familiar, but we as a governmental entity obviously must do business in public, and all of our documents, email transactions, and communications are all subject to public record. So it's always a good, friendly reminder to us that everything we say and do is representative of our organization, and being mindful that we are being viewed by members of the public and potentially news and media organizations as well. The next piece there, Ohio Ethics Commission, I won't go into all the details, but I would highly suggest following those links, doing the quick trainings, conflict of interest, gifts, things that I, before joining a governmental entity, really hadn't thought of in those regards. So I think it's really helpful. And then finally, a link to ODE's finance and funding website for additional information. So I would highly recommend as a new member, as a standing member, just to revisit that so we can better understand kind of our governance framework here as an organization. So moving right along to the next slide about the Board of Education. We have 2 members here with us today, so I won't belabor the points, but the thing I really wanted to provide you all with are links to key parts of our website. So board docs, that is where you can find meeting materials for all of our audit committee, other committee, and board meetings, as well as board policies. And then I would highly recommend tuning into the meeting schedules, broadcasts, and minutes. So that way, when we come into these audit committee meetings, we all have a pretty consistent understanding of the major trends of the organization. So again, this is meant to serve as a resource for you all to click those links and utilize. So moving right along, breaking it down a level further, we're kind of starting big picture and working our way down, is our finance committee. So of course, our 3 members of the board who are on audit are also members of our finance committee. You can see their responsibilities as stated there, but also the thing we attached via the link is their calendar year 22 work plan. So if you're interested in what are the objectives, what is being accomplished at each of the monthly finance committee meetings, you can follow right along and maybe choose which are most applicable to tune in, although I would highly recommend for our audit committee folks to join it virtually and watch our finance committee meetings whenever possible. The final resource you see there.
And as an aside, we can attend finance committee meetings.
You've got it. You can come in person, you can come virtually. Yep.
They're very interesting. So if any audit committee meetings would like to attend, welcome, correct?
Yeah, please, please. Also, if I could, Mr. Chair, that do we, as a rule, send the finance minutes after they've been adopted to the audit committee members? Davis? So we do send the finance minutes. I mean, I'm glad that we do that on a regular basis.
We can start
after adoption.
Absolutely, and I'll upload them to a folder in our Google Drive as well. We'll title them Finance Committee Minutes, and Phyllis and I will work together to make sure those are always in there. But if they aren't there and you're looking for them, they will be on the link from the prior slide as well. But we'll make it easy and have them in one spot for you. Great point. And the final title or bullet, I should say, there is the school finance training. So Treasurer Wagner, this past May of 21, put together a really robust school finance training for all of our audit committee members. So that slide deck is linked right there in the final bullet. And I would say that's a great resource to revisit, especially for our new members, and also just refresh your knowledge.
I attended that. It was an excellent presentation.
It was.
I also offered to do it as often as you all would like to. I love doing it, so just let me know.
Wonderful. So to bring this all together onto the next slide, put together a very, very summarized version of our reporting structure just to see how everything flows together. So you'll see, as we mentioned, the board, finance, audit, and then the direct reports to the board being myself, the superintendent, and our treasurer CFO, but of course with my functional reporting being to this. So moving on to some specifics about the audit committee, the next slide has links to the Google Drive where all of our files are housed. As a friendly reminder, we ask that all audit committee members review reports and documents in advance of our audit committee meetings. I know we all came to an agreement this year that internal audit will no longer walk you through the reports. We're going to hit the high levels, we're going to hit the takeaways, and spend our time on more robust discussion. Of course, our audit committee charter breaks down the key aspects and requirements of the committee. And then I included 2 additional websites. There is an external CPS website linked there, as well as an intranet site that is intended more so for employees. That has each of your bios that you all have submitted and some more additional background around audit committee as well as internal audit. And a friendly reminder linking the conflict of interest and related party disclosure form that we complete at the first meeting of every calendar year. So the next few slides are actually something that we shared with you back in October, but for those who are new, we wanted to reiterate. So what role do we all play? So if we press the slide button once more, you'll see your role, my role, and our management team's role clearly outlined in what role we all play and how we come together. The next slide is another depiction, more so the 3 lines of defense, again, just for your reference, so we can see how we work together to prevent risk through proper control and oversight. So finally here, the About Internal Audit slide, again, some links to our pages, our charter, and then just be really clear about how we differ between CPS internal audit, our external audit groups, and then maybe what's done at a corporate IA level. So I would say CPS internal audit is very adaptable and aligned with the strategy of management. And our external auditors, of course, are regulated and are set by the state, as we previously discussed. And something that differs between our internal audit shop and those maybe at a publicly traded company is that often internal auditors in your Macy's or what have you maybe are predominantly focused often on Sarbanes-Oxley and the other SEC regulations. So that kind of makes us a bit more focused on operations, performance, compliance, and a little less so on the SOX controls that a lot of IA shops spend their time on. Yes, and they do both. They do have teams that do it all. So we're focused on one area and they focus on a lot. And again, the next slide is a depiction of what you've seen in your audit plan, the reports that we've produced, in the work that we do in being advisory, assurance, and follow-up. The next slide is our internal audit cycle. So for those who are new, we perform our work on a cyclical basis. Right now, we just concluded our risk assessment and planning period, moving right on into the execution of the plan. And as you see, we go right around, and come this time next year, we'll have done it again. So that's really, those slides were meant to be a quick rundown of CPS high level, breaking it down all the way to internal audit, more so this is a resource you all can utilize moving forward, and having most of the links and helpful resources in one place.
As an aside, our year is June 30, correct?
Correct.
So we adopted the plan for today, starts July 1st.
Absolutely. Yep, perfect timing.
This is just a fantastic resource. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And if you have questions as you dig into things, we can give you all the detail you want, but at least this is the link to get you started. And so the second half of this conversation is around the audit committee. So as we talked about, what is internal audit going to focus on and do this year? But I really wanted to be intentional this year to say, you all as the audit committee, let's throw the conversation back among our 13 members and have some dialogue around what we hope to accomplish this year. It really ties back to, as you see, I quoted the audit committee charter. The charter states the audit committee will periodically assess the effectiveness. And so in my mind, in order to assess your effectiveness, it helps to have some goals. So we really can, have a wide variety of goals. We brainstorm some ideas to bring forth today as well. It could be things as simple, and I say simple, it's not, as completing the work plan, which is the document linked there. The work plan is each component of the charter broken out and indicated what meeting it will be completed at. That's a big lift. That part of assessing the audit committee, that's part of that work plan. So that's one suggestion. We had thought about having a quorum for each meeting as a potential goal, which I feel like we did this last year and knocked it out of the park. Completing the entire work plan, as I mentioned, 100% participation in the planning survey or feedback form, selecting a specific area to learn more about or a specific district project to provide advice or consultation. Those are some of the ideas I had, but I'm just thinking if I were in your shoes, I know the fundamentals. I know what I'm here for. I provide guidance and I hear the audit reports and I ensure management implements and we provide oversight on external auditors. But like more tangibly, what do we hope to accomplish beyond that? So I might turn it over to each of you to go around the table. If you're prepared, if not, feel free to say next. But I just want to make sure everyone's heard and we'll take this feedback and maybe jointly put together some ideas. So Ms. Mitchell, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we brought up that I think would be helpful is just the measurement year over year, having some goals. What are our goals that we hope to improve or see improvement in specific items that are focused year over year would be one of my suggestions. I don't know that.
I liked your presentation. This is good. This is a nice blueprint that could be used year on year and shows a high level of sophistication and in digging into what's happening in the Cincinnati Public Schools. I didn't really see anything in here necessarily about benchmarking, where we're benchmarking against our audit plan versus maybe what some other big city districts are doing, and maybe also benchmarking against maybe there could be a component of the audit plan that benchmarks success of the district versus success of other districts. And we don't want to compare to Cleveland because we know we're going to win, but maybe some other cities some cities that are doing really well. And we've got a new superintendent, and this might be something to help us have some perspective.
We try to have presentations from various functional areas. Then we have food service. One year we had transportation. We have preschool. And I think it's up to us as independent members of the audit committee. If we hear something that doesn't make sense or doesn't seem quite right, we should ask about it. We should stand tall and ask the questions, because there really is no other body that formally does that. So I would ask that the audit committee members, if they're uncomfortable with something that's said, doesn't make sense, then I think you should ask about it. My overall goal is to try to make a difference for the district.
I think it makes sense to think about goals, but I think one of the hard things about establishing goals with what we do is it seems like every year there's one topic that comes up that we spend a lot of time advising on, discussing, hearing about. It was abatements one year, it was charter schools, transportation and benefits have been recent. Quite frankly, we really don't know what that issue is going to be this year. Hopefully it's not any of these again, but I think one of our goals should be to be focused on what the current events and current status of the district are and what the needs are that come about that we can't foresee today and that need our attention this year.
I agree with everything that was already said. I do agree that this is an opportunity for us to really understand how we, in our role, kind of impact what happens within the district. And so to Chairman Helmut's point, when there's questions or something that doesn't sound right, or if there's additional information that we need, just making sure that we ask the appropriate questions to get that. I know in some cases we've had, I said I wasn't going to say anything then. In some cases we've had reports and we've had information that required some additional feedback or additional responses. And I think just making sure that we remember to circle back to get those responses in previous or subsequent meetings. I think that's a good goal to have, that we don't let things just fall by the wayside.
I agree with an earlier comment. I think, Lauren, you made that it would be helpful for the members to try and attend or watch the Finance Committee meetings. And I know the board meetings can be long, and there's a lot of sort of non-financial information in there. But I think, as much as we can kind of take the time between meetings to stay involved in what's happening, whether that's through, news or anything like that with the district, that would help us just know what's important that's going on right now that we should be paying attention to. And in terms of, I really like the schedule where we're going through each of our roles and what meeting that's going to happen at. And I think too, if we have, I know, I don't want to put more work on you, but if we can have some sort of, some more specific like assignments or areas that we should prepare for each meeting. So, we want to have a discussion on like X topic or this specific presentation, because there are a lot of documents in the folder for the meeting, and sometimes it's hard to get a sense just from the long list of documents, like what we're going to spend more time on, what are the more important things. So if we had, kind of a little bit more direction on like what we should be preparing for, I think that would enable us to have better discussions in the meeting and, actually kind of dig into some of these things. I also, just one last thing, I think the shortened presentations and reports would be very helpful, so that we're just hitting, hitting the most important points, and so that we do have more time for discussion, because I think sometimes we end up trying to rush through the agenda, and then, we kind of run out of time to really talk about things instead of just, hitting everything for the record, basically. Thanks.
Again, this is just my third meeting, I don't really have an exact goal, but I would second everything that Liz just said, especially, immersing myself in the links that you just provided. I think that's going to be my number one goal from jump. So thank you.
As an aside, what happens procedurally is Lauren will draft an agenda and send it to Dan and I and Mrs. Bolton. And I add a lot of things. I'll add topics. So if the audit committee members, you have your feet on the ground, if you see something you're uncomfortable with that doesn't make sense, please send me an email and I will try to add it to the agenda. Because our agenda, we are the audit committee. Okay, we have a lot of freedom there. So, for example, if somebody has just a child in the Cincinnati Public Schools and their kid doesn't get picked up by the bus, we'll go back to transportation. Someone had an issue with a meal. Well, I'll put that on the agenda. We'll have somebody from food service speak to us about it. But it's our agenda, so just communicate with me. And I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but I'm telling you now that I'll try to get it on the agenda if it's of concern to members of the committee.
Absolutely. And do our board members have any thoughts or suggestions as well?
I just think it's great as much that the audit committee they're here not just because of their expertise, but that they represent the community. And as they hear things in the community, that they are also the voice of the community. We need more voices that way. And I think the more that the audit committee can focus and actually deliberate and discuss, I know some of the times that's when the best stuff happens, rather than necessarily presentation and in reacting to the presentation. So it's not a bad idea to, save some time and save some opportunity for just open discussion about certain things. If it's something that treasurer brings or auditor brings or individually you all bring, I think that would be helpful. And again, we're going to be under new leadership. We have very much a hands-on superintendent, operationally and instructionally. And looking ahead, there'll be some things that we'll need to get your advice about as well. So I think if we can build that into your work and our work, we rely heavily on you. We want to rely more on you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is just the idea of holding ourselves accountable to the things that we've committed to doing each year. So I think a big part of that also is, and we're doing it internally, or I should say Jen is, Treasurer Wagner is doing it internally with regards to, are the things that we're doing having an impact? And I think that building that into the reviews, into what we're discussing, is a good part of that accountability phase, because I think we've done for a long time, whether or not what we did we accomplished, whether or not what we did is successful is actually probably a different point. And so I think that aspect of, but again, going to what the chairman's saying is, if you see things, yeah, we got buses going on time, but they're not, like, this bus stop is not working, right? So like that's a legit issue, that the bus is on time and everything is going right, but it's not working. Might be something that could be something the audit committee also raises as a point of impact, more so than just success of implementing.
Thank you very much. So we're on schedule, close to it. So Jennifer, do you have a financial update you'd like to present to us?
Sorry, if I might just conclude. Thank you all for the feedback. I just want to say, in terms of next steps from what I just heard, we'll take all of those pieces. I've got notes, and I'm sure my team does too, and draw some common threads, summarize, bring those to the August meeting, and see, what we want to adopt as our perhaps more formal goals, and maybe what are things that we'll take as kind of our best practice or kind of agreed upon standard operating procedure. And I can't echo Mr. Heldman enough in terms of input for the agendas, because I view this from an audit perspective, and I want your perspective too. Inject new ideas. Let's bring some cool things in this year. And I will go back to what Mr. Crossett said before. Our development as an internal audit group and an audit committee over the since 2009, but since I've been here since 2016, has been astronomical. I think we're just now at a point with new leadership and the start of this new fiscal year that we can now get to the next phase of growth and maturity as an organization. So I welcome your input, feedback, challenge my thinking. I'll challenge yours, and I'm really excited for this year. Thank you all so much.
So I do have some financial updates for you, some topics to cover. The May financial slides are in your folder, so I won't go over those. But suffice to say that in May, we're at 98% of our revenues, less than 80% of our budgeted spend. And so we're confident we're going to finish the year. We got one more day left in the year, in a positive with a healthy cash balance. So things are going well. The board adopted the budget Monday night unanimously. Thank you. So that we can start our fiscal year 23 operations on July 1st. Couple things to note about the budget. So this was the third budget cycle that had quite a different challenge. But for the last 3 years, we had COVID, we had state budget change last year. This year we had a transition, and a key role is into the superintendent. So we were 75 to 80% way through the budget when a new superintendent started. And so we were trying to pivot to give her room to operate and make some changes in the leadership style. We were able to do that. One of the challenges with this year's budget was the fact that the CPP, the Society Preschool Promise, and CPS preschool has grown beyond what the annual allocation of the levy is. So if you remember, in 2016, the voters approved a $48 million levy with a $15 million set aside to fund the expansion of preschool. Well, our combined budgets this year were close to $19 million. And so we're starting to dip into the early years of unspent cash in that levy. And so what I talked to the board about was we're forecasting that sometime in between the 25 and 26 school year that cash unreserved, that reserve cash will be gone. And so that this levy comes up for renewal in 25, and we may consider an increase to that value. So they're thinking about that.
Does the state give us money for that?
I'm sorry?
Does the state give us any financial
No, they
support
don't
for
fund,
preschool?
they don't fund regular ed preschool unless, every 2 years you get a different budget. They may change. We don't know.
At the present time, they don't pay for anything.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
At the present time, they do not give us money for
No.
preschool students.
Mhm. Just
Is that a- is
preschool
that a-
students with disabilities they will fund, but not regular ed.
Is that a levy you're talking about?
Levy, yeah. And we do, great segue, we have a levy on the ballot in November. So the board very graciously allowed me to make it a 10-year levy instead of a 5-year levy. And the documents, both resolutions have been adopted by the board, and we filed with Hamilton County Board of Elections, and we're waiting for our issue number and starting our campaign planning after hours off time. There was something else I wanted to. So since we just finished the one budget, I've already started working on the new budget cycle. And one of my goals this year is to do phase 2 of the equitable distribution of financial resources, which is, in my mind, is because I'm so mathematically driven, it's really hard because in my mind, equity is like the definition is the eyes of the beholder, kind of like beauty, right? So we're looking for really good measurable definitions. And I've started developing what we're calling an equity index by school building that has probably 8 or 9 measures in it. Like the percent of students with disabilities, the percent of English language learners, what's the economically disadvantaged percentage of the building, size of the building, and some of the academic measures on reading and math scores. And so the superintendent and I are partnering up on that part of it to come up with a school-by-school equity index so we can figure out how to allocate based on that index. It's kind of exciting. So we're starting that, and as I progress, I'll share probably in either August or the next meeting. Talked about year end.
Are other schools having to do this too, Jen? Are we having to recreate it ourselves, or?
Yeah, we're creating it. So the Council of Great City Schools, all the districts, when we do the financial conference, we're all struggling with the same things. How do you measure a real ROI, academically? And how do you do equity financially? And so I do have a group of colleagues that I meet with on a regular basis. I call it Jen and the men because it's me and 4 men that are treasurers in the large urbans. We meet every Thursday morning. And mostly it started out with just kind of emotional support through COVID, and it's turned into a really nice group where we share ideas, help each other solve problems, and then we band together to challenge our ODE colleagues because of the 613 school districts, there's only 8 of us that are urbans, and we have different challenges than everybody else. And so they try to go to the middle, and the urbans get hurt a lot when they have their decision making. So we're forming a coalition to protect the urbans. And so I talked to them about equity too, but we're advanced where they are in terms of their budgeting cycle. We're always on the bleeding edge, and it's exciting. So the only other financial news I think is the board is considering joining the lawsuit against vouchers in Ohio. There's a coalition out there that has done some studies where the vouchers hurt the economically disadvantaged students. There's a claim that they're being discriminated against, that the private schools, they have entrance criteria where we take everybody that comes. And we don't know, since they're being directly funded right now, it doesn't pass through us anymore, so they're not taking our local share, but we don't know that they haven't taken that local share at the front end at the state budget level before they give us money, right? So it's always a challenge. So the boards, you haven't voted yet, I think you're going to vote in July, right? Yeah.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So that's the news, and we'll keep you informed on that respect. I think there's only one urban that hasn't joined yet, but they have their own voucher program. Cleveland does.
Yes.
So all the other will be the last other urban to join.
That the voucher lawsuit, would it also include student recruiting practices?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that level of detail into that yet. I do know that Lauren sent me that they just did a finding for recovery against ECOT and all their bad practices. It was, how much was it? I want to say like 19 million, something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, so they're starting to catch on to some of the behaviors, unregulated. So.
I really like this. That was included in our.
That is
forward.
fantastic.
This is the best kind of thing I've seen in a long time. Yeah. But now I can actually ask some questions.
Yeah. So the one I sent to the board 2 meetings ago actually had the projected students and calculated a per pupil spend, but I just simplified it for Monday nights. I can forward that to you as well.
Are we going to make the fund 088, you think?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Pupil transportation? Is that going to be enough money? 36 million.
There's $9 million. This is just the general fund budget. In ESSER, we have $9 million targeted for transportation for next year.
9 million in addition to the 36?
Yes.
The 45 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions for Jen?
Yes, one question. Contingency in this is a negative. What is that? That seems like that's a bad thing. We have a negative contingency.
Yeah, that's a negative contingency. So what we realized 2 years ago was that every year we underspent our salary budget because of vacancies. We just always have a rolling vacancy, but it's been growing every year, and particularly since COVID. So this fiscal year, as of the 25th of the 26 pays, we were $26 million underspent for the year in salaries. And so we're saying, so we budget in the schools based on a formula. And so we're saying that if we're always going to have that underspend, we can repurpose that money to invest in other things. And so we put that in as a negative because I don't know where the underspend is going to occur in one of it's 153 budget units now. And so we just put it in a centralized unit as a negative contingency.
So this is because we're never at full employment with all the employees?
Right. So there's also a line in there that at the end of the federal grant cycle, so by September 30th of every year, we have to file all of our federal expenditure reports. And then at the end of September, October 1st, we'll go in and cancel the prior year, any open encumbrance that hasn't been paid out, because the invoices should have been in and paid out for services that were incurred by June 30. And so every year that's growing too. So we have all this money sit out there and it comes back to cash. We're using that estimate to help fund the superintendent's reorganization plan. So, and that was presented last Monday night if you want to watch the board meeting, or we can send you the PowerPoint.
Is it wise to put a negative contingency in there when we're trying to get a school levy passed? The argument would be they have $18 million.
I'm just trying to be as transparent. I mean, I could have buried it somewhere, right? But I was just trying to be as transparent as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the transparency is good, but you could relabel that open position.
Sure, we can do that.
Transparency is great, but use the right verbiage. That's why it's so transparent.
Good suggestion.
Any other questions for Jen? Okay.
I have and forgive me for being a bear about this, but do tell them about the amount of money, whatever, regarding transportation. And we believe that everything's been closed out for the year versus the last several years. That we're not carrying forward.
Yeah, so if you remember from the training that we did, the definition of a then and now is it's a certificate that I have to sign. That's when somebody goes and incurs an expense without the proper purchase order process. And that happens on occasion, emergency purposes, but it was happening a lot with transportation because they weren't staying on top of their invoices for the year. So after the year closed, we would be presented from last year's invoices, but there was no budget to cover it. And so at one year, I think it was almost up to $8 million. This is several directors ago. So we've worked hard with them. I have a team that's assigned to meet with the transportation department every month to go over and try to keep them up to date on their invoices. And so I think for this year, knock on wood, we're much cleaner. So yes, I don't think we'll be doing anything else for transportation. Did that suffice, Ms. Bolton?
Any other questions for Jen? And then Eve, you have the floor now to talk other
Thank you.
district and district updates.
Yeah, fortunately, Superintendent Wright covered the 3 topics that are listed. I appreciate that. I would add to that, again, the lawsuit that you mentioned, that there is an interest on the part of the board to proceed with that. And I would, based upon previous conversations regarding the audit committee and the focus on charters and focus on vouchers and what it does to us financially, would hope that the audit committee would agree that we should enter into something like that, or at least not have, or at least have any questions or whatever, if you can affirm to us or any ideas. I think we'll be voting, I believe, on July 18th, if not August 1st, depending upon vacations. But yes, in a levy year, all the questions we get are, but I thought the funding was unconstitutional. Why do we have to have another renewal? So we kind of felt symbolically it's important for us to join with our colleagues and at least be able to tell the voters that we're trying to get a fair amount of money for our kids and not deal with some of this unfairness that exists with vouchers and with charters. So it was partly that kind of thing, I think, that swayed the interest. And most recently, as Jen said, I think Toledo and Cincinnati were basically the 2 holdouts for various and sundry reasons of the urbans. So we look forward to joining that. I would also, there's always a little bit of a flashpoint between the administration and some board members about the equity issue, which also complicates it from a standpoint. So I would suggest that, it's so hard to determine how to do that, but the board keeps telling the administration that, well, look at our policies, but that doesn't necessarily help them find the format or the mathematical equations to do what they need to do. But it would not be a bad idea for the audit committee to review, was it 2255 and 2256, the equity and excellence policy and the anti-racism policy, just to be ready to kind of be talking about that. And then not to belabor this, but transportation is so critical, but we do have that contract with Metro, and we do have, as Jen mentioned, the preschool contract. So those are going to impact us, I would imagine, greatly. The policy committee, and I think the whole board and the administration is interested in making our Cincinnati Digital Academy statewide. And we are legally allowed to do that. And when we feel that we're able to be in the competitive field, we probably, I would assume, somewhere halfway through the year, if the administration feels that we're ready. I think there's the interest on the board, having now have gone through, I think, policy 3-4 months now, and also had the CDA folks come in and talk to us, the idea of maybe us going live maybe even before the end of the year as a statewide charter, not charter, but yeah, well, sort of a charter. And we're allowed to do that according to general counsel without necessarily having all of our schools be open enrollment. But that's also a discussion, is whether or not we should have open enrollment or not have open enrollment. But we are allowed legally to have at least one, we could do one school that could be statewide. So we're kind of interested in that CDA option. The other piece, thematically, going forward, there is finally an ad hoc committee of 3 board members and possibly some community members looking at a serious effort of finding a better way to organize our programming geographically and from a transportation piece that is more sustainable, dealing with something we're really proud of, high schools of choice, or making neighborhood schools actually neighborhoods instead of splitting neighborhoods up and doing. So it's even though we've been working on this, according to Mike Morawski, I think 6 years, we're now kind of at another threshold to begin that process. And it seems as though the superintendent's interested in doing that. And I know Jen is interested in the financial aspects of trying to organize ourselves in this different way that is more sustainable. But that'll be something coming up throughout the next school year with you and fiscal year.
Any questions for Eve? First, I'd like to say 2 things. Thank you, Phyllis, for sending out our information to us. I'm sure it's a big job. And my vice chairman, Dan Holthouse, had a baby.
Yay!
My wife had a baby.
His
Wife had a baby. I'm sorry. If anybody have any questions or anything you want to talk about? That being said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.
I know that because you told me.